Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel and welcome to listening to your brush when it comes to your paint. Now you've probably not sort of picked up on this when it comes to your paint in your brush. You sort of just mix your consistencies and you're spraying. You're concentrating on what's coming out the front of the brush. Now you can listen as well and you'll hear the different sounds of the brush when you put different thicknesses of paint through when you're running at a set air pressure. If you're used to running at say 20 psi, my ballpark in the studio on the main line is 20 psi. I'll set it to that and leave it at that, and then I'll sort of mix my paints and get the flow right to 20, because I know 20 psi on what I'm working on, I can go up close to 20 and work at 20 psi. Not a problem, depending on what substrate you're working on. If you're working on material like fabrics like t-shirts, you can wallop the air pressure up because the paint will absorb into fabric and you're not going to get any sort of spider webbing. When you work on certain papers, again, you're sort of 20 psi, it's good, it's a good one to start out, and you can drop your pressures down because you're working on something that is sort of absorbent. When you go on synthetic papers, which are really, really smooth and slippery, you've got to start bringing your air pressure down because you don't want to be walloping 20, 30 or 40 psi at something that's really smooth, because you're more than likely, with an airbrush, you are working 2 to 3 millimeters on your details right up close on the paper, and you don't want high pressure with your paint consistency being quite thin. It's just going to blow out everywhere. So listening to your brush as well will help you when it comes to your paint, because you will hear different sounds out your brush with the consistencies of your paint. Now a good way of checking this is put a dark background up, drop some water in your clean airbrush and spray, and you will see the atomization coming out and you'll hear the brush. Now the brush will sound very free flowing, it just sounds perfect, it really does. When you put water through, it's like the best flowing liquid that will go through an airbrush is water. It's like, sounds nice, comes out the brush nice, atomizes really well. That's how you want your paint. If you've ever used an aerosol can, whether you're using primers or base coats, the reason why aerosol cans spray so well is because they are thinned out. The paint is really, really thin. And when you look at an aerosol nozzle, they're tiny. You're getting a primer out of a tiny little nozzle like that. You shake the can and it sprays really, really easy. That's how you want your paint for your airbrush, exactly the same as what is in an aerosol can. Because you look at the nozzle on an aerosol can, it's tiny. You look at the airbrush nozzle, it's exactly the same. So just gauge your paint mix on what you'd get out of an aerosol can and you'll be good to go. Now, listening to your brush, when you heard that there with the water, and it sounds nice, free flowing, if I was to put thick paint through this now and drop it in the brush, one of these paints here that are classed as airbrush paints, straight out the bottle, you're going to hear this brush sound completely different. It will sound raspy, it will sound choked up. It's because the air pressure is set for that thin consistency like that. The minute you put something thick in, you can hear a sound difference, but it's something that usually beginners won't pick up on. But if you just keep a sort of an eye out for that, when you put your thick paint in, you just give it a little test to the side, because I always say, whatever project you're working on, whether you're building models and you're painting them, or you're working on automotive, or even if you're working on an easel or you're working on a not so much t-shirt, because you can get away, as I say, you can crank the air pressure up on a t-shirt and you're not going to get any spider webbing because the paint just absorbs into fabric. But when you're working on other substrates that are smoother, automotive, or you're working on plastic models, always test your brush to the side with your paint. You need to test that paint because you want your paint like out of a can. You want to see that atomization like that, and when it's like this, when you spray it, you're going to get that real nice soft edge. If you do a dot on some paper with your paint before you start painting, and just look at your paint, just see what it's doing. If it's thick, you're going to see speckled edges on the dot. If the consistency is right, you're going to see a real nice soft transition on the outer of that circle. As you do that, the airbrush sprays like a cone of paint out and it will be soft around the edge. So if I was to put thick paint in this now at 20 psi and spray like that, as I say, you'll hear a different sound. So it's another thing you can pick up on. You'll know whether your paint mix is right. If you've got your air pressure at 20, that's what you work at. You'll know if it's thick, you go like that, your brush will sound completely different. It really will. It will sound raspy. And the first thing you do is you crank your air pressure up because you're trying to atomize that thicker paint. So paints to sort of look out for. Ones that are really good and free flowing, the ones that I get on with that you're going to have less dramas with are inks. Inks will flow through the airbrush a lot easier and they're a lot less frustrating than when you start moving on to other airbrush paints. Now, these are, from here, are airbrush paints that you will see on the market. And the beginners will go, right, we're going to pick this one up, golden. And it is an airbrush paint. This will spray straight out the bottle. But when you spray this straight out the bottle, you will get that different tone sound in your brush. If you're running 20 psi with golden, you might need to just tweak it a little bit. Now, I always mix golden 1:1, 1 drop of golden, 1 drop of water. Seems the best mix ratio, and I've used this for years, this stuff, and it works really, really well. When you move on to Wicked, it's a great airbrush paint, but you've got to thin it, and you'll notice this when you shake it, it's like not even moving in the bottle. And I've decanted it a little bit into a plastic pot, and that isn't even moving. That's just a blob out the bottle. And this is airbrush paint. So the beginner will get this and he'll put that straight into his brush. And that's when you're going to hear that raspy sound. The brush will be struggling to get that out because that's thick. It really is. So then you've got to start looking at different reducers. You're going into these reducers now. You've got to start buying these to get these paints to flow. And you've got to start mucking around with your mixing ratios to get them to flow. Because you want the consistency, like what's in one of these, to get it to come out of the brush. When you move on to Createx Illustration, I've found with the Createx Illustration, we've got a Payne's Grey. This one sprays straight out the bottle, but when you shake it, it sounds a lot thinner in this. Some of the other Createxes, because you've got like transparent and you've got opaques, and that's another thing you've got to look at is transparent and opaques. Transparent paints will spray, most of them straight out the bottle. Some of your opaques are a lot thicker because it's a more pigmented colour. It's more like sort of you spray it once and you'll see the colour straight down solid when you spray like an opaque. When you spray a transparent, you'll spray it, and if you were to hold it up to the light, you'd sort of see through it. It's like a stained glass window in a church, transparent. You look through and you can see through it, and that's how transparent sort of works. You build it up. You can overlay transparents to a opaque. It'll then black out eventually when you keep overlaying it and overlaying it. So transparents will run thinner. So you'll find this in paint brands as well. You'll get a transparent set and you'll get like an opaque set. Moving on to like the Atom, which is sort of for the miniature model painters. Again, some of them sound really thin, but then when other ones sound quite thick on the mixes like this one, that sounds really, really thick. So then you've got to start thinning it, then you've got to get the thinner for that. When you move on to the cheap acrylics like this, because people are probably picking them up, this is like, you can't even hear it moving the bottle. It's really thick. You know, this would be like pouring out the Wicked. It's just a thick bodied acrylic that doesn't even move. You know, you'd be using this with a paintbrush. So you've got to start thinning it out. You really have. So listening to your brush, with your paints will sort of help you out. It really will. You'll just hear the tone in the brush, you'll test to the side, and if it sounds raspy, you know you've got to add a bit more thinner. So it's just another little thing to sort of pick up on. Other than just trying to mix your consistency right, you can do it by sound as well. Now I've found this in the body shop. This goes across the board with big spray guns as well. Exactly the same. If you put a real thick paint through a big spray gun and you're running 2-bar pressure, you can always look, like I say, against a dark surface. I usually go in the body shop and I'll hold the gun towards the dark colour of the filter. You've probably seen it on my videos where I go like that before I start painting and press the trigger and have a look at the spray pattern. See what it's doing at 2-bar and just see how it's atomizing the clear coat out. Or put a piece of brown paper that you'd mask a car off with, stick that on the wall and spray. Spray your fan pattern against it and you'll see what your paint's doing. It's just always a good thing to check just to see how the paint's coming out. Because if you were to start painting a car with your base coat, if you've got a real thick base coat and you go to hit it and you've gone straight in on the panel, it will go down, grain it, and it looks like sand. When it lays down, it lays like sand. You want your base coats, when it comes to like car painting and things like that, you want them to go down smooth. You want it to go down wet, but really sort of like smooth. So when it dries back, it goes down like a real like satin type effect, but very smooth. And this is how you want your airbrush paints to go down. You want them to go down nice and smooth. You want the atomization to be really soft, because you want to see them soft transitions. You don't want to see grainy, sand piled transitions on a portrait unless you're doing like textures. There's times when you need that sort of texture, and that's when you can use slightly thicker paints and you can drop your air pressure down so you get that speckled effect if you're after a sort of background texture. So you can adapt thin paints and thick paints when it comes to airbrushing, depending what you are doing. So inks, less dramas. Your other paints, you've got to start looking into your reducers. Now, reducers that are on the market, ones that I think that work well, when it comes to Createx, stick to Createx reducers because they're designed for their paints. We've got the 4021, we've got the 4011. When it comes to golden, your first port of call, that's why I like golden, is water. You can just drop water in it. You can use their high flow medium, which is this one. You can go sort of 1-to-1 with their high flow medium. What the high flow medium will do is as well, if you've got a opaque golden and you want to sort of pull it towards more of a transparent, you can put the high flow medium in. It will make it flow better and it will just pull it across to more of a transparent, so you can turn like your opaque and bring it across to a transparent and you'll get that nice flow with it. So that's what the high flow medium will do. You've got water with golden as well, which is nice. When it comes to Wicked, you've got the new version of Wicked and you've got the older. The new one that I've used on the channel, which is this one, you can use your 4021, you can use your 4011 with it, but you can also just mix it straight with ISO. Now I've mixed it with isopropanol for very up close, sort of the miniature credit card type portraits. It works really well, so you can use that with the Wicked. Illustration, you can use your 4021, your 4011, and you can use water, which is good. So you can just mix your illustrations and do a drop of distilled water. Your Atom, use their reducer. If you're a miniature model painter, use the reducers for that actual paint. I've not got the reducer for that paint. I've just got this sent out to do a test, and I've tried it with that with other reducers, and you'll see this. If you use sort of testing different reducers with different paints, sometimes they curdle up, sometimes they work. If you find one that works, sort of just jot it down and stick to it. But sort of go with the brand reducers for them paints and you'll have no issues. If you get technical data sheets on mixing ratios, have a look at them. It's always good to have a look at the technical data sheets when it comes to paint mixing. It really is, than just going straight off the cuff and trying things. When it comes to your inks, water, drop water in, drop of water. You've probably seen me on the channel where I'm doing the FW inks with ISO. Now, the reason why I do the FW with water and ISO, when you put the ISO in and the water with the FW and you look at the mix in your cup, it looks very sort of, you can flick the side of the cup and it sort of does that. It really like solidifies it and it makes it sort of flow really nice, and that's why I'm using ISO with the FW. I've not tried the ISO with Liquitex or the Bombay yet, but they flow nice with water, and you're adding very minimal sort of water to their mixes. You really are, because the inks flow very, very well anyway. When you put water with them, it just sort of gives it that little bit more flow, free flowing. Now, the reason why I'm knocking the inks back is I'm working a lot of the time on real close-up detail. If you've seen me do the miniature portraits when you're working on something like credit card size, you want that paint to be very, very thin, extremely thin, to near on where you've got it completely washed out, past sort of as transparent, because you're working around 6 to 7 psi, which in a brush is literally nothing. When you knock the air pressure back down to that, water is like the consistency you're getting these inks to, probably a little bit thinner, a little bit smoother. When it comes to the ISO mix in there, it feels smoother. It doesn't sound as raspy as water coming through. It sounds a lot less, sounds a lot quieter. So that's why I'm knocking my paints right back to that, is when I'm working really, really up close on tiny little stuff. If you've ever seen David Naylor do his miniature stuff, I mean, he's doing stuff that is like unheard of when it comes to airbrushing, the small, tiny stuff that he's doing. And if you hear on his videos, you won't even hear his brush spraying. He's got the air pressure down that low. The paint mixes are really, really thin. He's got it dialed right in because he is working so intricate on small stuff. And this is when you knock your paints right back. If you're working on t-shirts, your paint consistency is, you can get away with a lot more because you're working on a fabric. So you can really up your pressure. You can go right up close. You've not got to worry. It's sort of stress-free painting really, because you're just hitting fabric and it's not going anywhere. When you come over to automotive, you've got a smooth base coated panel. So it's a hard surface and you've got to get your paints dialed in, not too thin, but be able to spray nice at around 20. You can sit at 20 psi on automotive, sort of quite up close, 20 to 15 on your detail, and you're not going to get any spider webbing, but you want your paint to be flowing nice and be able to go down and not spider web and things like that. So having a go on different substrates is well worth a go, guys. It really is, from your papers to your material to your hard surfaces like aluminium, and just have a go with your paint brand that you use, because you'll have a different mixing ratio for different surfaces. You really will, and you'll have different air pressures for different surfaces. So it's really worth having a little play at all of these different surfaces and just mastering your brush on all these different substrates. So when you come into doing work for people and they say, oh, can you paint me a portrait on this? You know exactly what to do. It's less stress. You'll know exactly what reducer to go for. You'll know exactly what paint to use for that specific surface, because all these paints go down on different surfaces. They really do. You can't just say, I'm going to use this for every application, because it's not built for every application. You can use it for every application, but you've got to use other products with this for different applications. So it's understanding a hell of a lot when it comes to paint. It really is. And there's so many different paint brands out there to get your sort of head round. But ones that I would recommend if you're doing automotive: Golden, Wicked. You can use Illustration, but you've got to use their Autoborn sealer. So if you're going down on automotive with Illustration, get the Autoborn sealer and drop a coat of Autoborn sealer down first. Then you can go in with your Illustration on top, because the Illustration will grip to it. If you go Illustration straight down over your base coats, yes, the paint will go down, you'll see it go down. But then when you come to clear coat and things like that, you're going to get issues because the paint has got no binders in it. It's used for sort of your illustration work where you're doing erasing. It's a paint that you can erase very easily. So an Autoborn sealer with that if you're going automotive. Wicked will bond straight down. Golden will bond straight down. I've used FW inks for automotive. That locks down nice. It bonds down really nice. So you can get away with that one. Your Atom, which would be your model painting. Now, because I don't do much model painting, I've done like a 3D print. These ones, when it comes to your miniatures, I'd stick to your sort of miniature type paints. There's loads out there, and because I don't go down the miniature painting route or the plastics and model painting routes, there's loads of brands of paint that I've not tested. But I would stick to the brands that are for that sort of specific genre. Just stick to it. You can use Golden and you can use Wicked on that. You could use Createx Illustration on that. But as I say, you'd put your different sealers down for your illustration when it comes to your plastics. Your Golden and your Wicked will go straight down on plastics, not a problem. Golden's very versatile throughout the board. I've used it on sort of every application. Material, I've used it on automotive, aluminium, I've used it on paper, and that's why I've sort of had that from day dot. It's worked across the board. You can get different sealers and things for Golden, so if you are working on like t-shirts, you can buy sort of their specific sealers that you'd put down first, and then you'd use the Golden paint, and then you'd put a seal over the top and sort of heat press it, things like that. So if you are going down a brand of paint, go onto the websites and just gen up on that paint brand and what you can use it for, because they will tell you what you can use it for. You can apply it on this, this, this and this, or it's not good for this. So have a good gen up on your paint. When it comes to your mixes, have a listen to your brush. Just have a little test with some water. You'll hear your brush. Try it with water. You'll hear the sound of the brush, and then just sort of aim for your paint mixes so you get that nice sound, and you'll start picking up on the sound of the brush, and before you know it, you'll just be mixing your paints. You'll be getting your consistencies like bang on every time, and whatever surfaces you're working on, you'll know your paint mix. Right, I'm working on aluminium today, I'm going to need this paint mix, runs nice at this pressure, and it'll just all sort of fall into place. But jot down as well, get a pen and paper and jot down your mixing ratios. If you're working on a different substrate, just jot down what works. And then you've got that as reference, like a little technical data sheet of your own with the paint brand that you are using. So I hope this helps, guys. Have a little play. I'll leave some links in the description to some of the paints, the ones that I'm using, the ones that I've used in the past. You'll see these being used on the channel anyway. Drop your comments, tell me your thoughts. If you get stuck, just drop me an email. I'm here to help. I'll guide you as much as I can, and in the comments, and just enjoy it. Whatever paint brand you've got, try it on different substrates and just enjoy it. Don't get too stressed about it. Just play with your mixes and just enjoy your airbrushing. That's what it's about. See you in the next one.